I'm Rose, and I'm 26 years old. My entire family laughed when the lawyer read my grandfather's will. While my cousins inherited millions in cash and real estate, all I got was a plane ticket to Monaco and a note that said, "Trust the journey." They literally pointed at me and snickered like I was some kind of joke. My cousin Brad actually said, "Looks like Grandpa finally figured out who the disappointment was." Even my own parents couldn't hide their smirks. 26 years of being the family workhorse, and this was my reward apparently. Because nothing says fair inheritance quite like giving the hardest worker a vacation voucher while everyone else gets actual money, right? But here's the thing about underestimating someone who's spent her entire life being overlooked. I smiled, took that ticket, and decided to see what the old man was really up to. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely dismissed by your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me back up to show you exactly how I ended up in that lawyer's office, watching my relatives divide millions while I clutched a boarding pass like some consolation prize. Growing up, I was always the odd one out. While my cousins got designer clothes and private tutors, I got hand-me-downs and lectures about being grateful. My parents, David and Linda Thompson, spent most of their energy making sure I knew I wasn't special. Rose needs to learn the value of hard work, they'd say, while my cousin Stephanie got a brand new car for her 16th birthday. Funny how character building only applied to one kid in the family. But Grandpa Charles was different. He owned Thompson Industries, this company that was apparently much bigger than any of us realized. He was stern with everyone else, but with me, he'd actually listen when I talked. When I was 18, he offered me a job at one of his regional offices. "You've got something the others don't," he said cryptically. "Work ethic." So I worked. I started in customer service, then moved to accounts, then project management. For 8 years, I climbed that corporate ladder while my cousins partied through college on trust funds. My family called it rose-playing office. They had no idea I was actually building something valuable while they were busy spending money they hadn't earned. Grandpa kept his work life separate from family life, which I respected. At family gatherings, he treated all of us grandkids equally. No special attention, no obvious favoritism. But at work, he'd occasionally call me into his office to discuss business strategy or get my perspective on operational improvements. I figured he valued my input because I was one of the few family members who actually understood the business. Looking back, I realize he was testing me. Every challenge he gave me, every responsibility he trusted me with, every time he asked my opinion, it was all evaluation. Not that I knew that at the time. I just thought I was lucky to have a boss who actually cared about my professional development. The day he died, I was devastated. Not because of money or inheritance expectations. I honestly never thought about that stuff. I was heartbroken because he was the only person in my family who seemed to actually see me as an individual, rather than just the responsible one they could dump tasks on. 3 weeks later, we all gathered in that mahogany-paneled conference room. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, opened his briefcase with all the ceremony of a royal announcement. My aunts and uncles sat forward eagerly. My cousins whispered about vacation plans they'd make with their windfalls. "To my grandson Bradley," Patterson began, "I leave the sum of $2 million. Brad pumped his fist like he'd won the lottery. "To my granddaughter Stephanie, I leave the Malibu beach house and $1 million. Stephanie actually squealed, because nothing says mature heir like squealing over inherited money you didn't work for. The list continued. Cash, properties, investment portfolios. Everyone got something substantial, something that would change their lives forever. Then Patterson looked directly at me. "And to my granddaughter Rose," he paused dramatically, "I leave this envelope with instructions that she must travel to Monaco immediately." The room exploded in barely contained laughter. My Aunt Margaret whispered loudly, "Well, at least she gets a vacation." Uncle Robert shook his head sympathetically like I was some charity case. The pity in their eyes was almost worse than the laughter, honestly. Inside the envelope was a first-class plane ticket to Monaco, a hotel confirmation for one night at the Hotel Hermitage, and a handwritten note in Grandpa's careful script. "Rose, trust the journey. Present this letter at the Prince's Palace tomorrow at noon. Ask for Henri. Tell him Charles sent you. Your real inheritance awaits." That was it. No explanation, no apology for leaving me practically nothing while everyone else became millionaires overnight. But standing there, watching my family's smug faces, something clicked. Grandpa wasn't cruel. He was the smartest businessman I'd ever known. If he left me a puzzle instead of a check, maybe there was more to this story than anyone realized. After all, the man who built a business empire probably didn't make random decisions about anything, especially not his life's work. The flight to Monaco gave me 12 hours to think, and honestly, I spent most of it questioning my sanity. Here I was, flying first class to one of the world's most expensive destinations, with exactly $400 in my checking account, and no plan beyond showing up at a palace with a mysterious note. Not exactly what you'd call a solid financial strategy. The flight attendant kept refilling my champagne like I belonged in first class. If only she knew I was probably about to become homeless when I got back to Chicago, since I'd quit my job to take this trip. Because nothing says responsible adult like quitting your job to chase a treasure hunt your dead grandfather might have left you, right? Monaco from the airplane window looked like a toy city someone had built along the Mediterranean. Impossibly blue water, white yachts that looked like floating mansions, and buildings stacked up the hillside like expensive jewelry boxes. I pressed my face to the window like a kid at Christmas, trying to process that I was actually here. The Hotel Hermitage was the kind of place I'd only seen in movies. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and staff who moved with the precision of ballet dancers. When I approached the front desk with my confirmation, the concierge's eyes widened slightly. "Ms. Rose Thompson," he said, consulting his computer screen. "Yes, you're in the Princess Grace suite. Your grandfather made these arrangements personally 2 months ago." 2 months ago. Grandpa had been planning this before he got really sick, before any of us knew he was dying. This wasn't some last-minute decision or consolation prize. This was deliberate, calculated, planned. My suite was bigger than my entire apartment back home. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the harbor, where yachts worth more than most people's houses bobbed gently in the evening sun. A bottle of Dom Perignon sat chilling on ice, with a card that simply read, "For courage, love, Grandpa." I poured myself a glass and stood on the balcony trying to make sense of everything. Below me, people in designer clothes strolled along the waterfront like money was never a concern. Sports cars that cost more than houses purred through streets lined with boutiques I couldn't even pronounce. This was clearly a world Grandpa had access to, despite 8 years of working for him and never knowing he moved in these circles. How had he kept this part of his life completely separate from everything we knew about him? The man was apparently a master of compartmentalization. My phone buzzed with texts from home. Brad had already posted Instagram stories from his new Porsche, because of course he'd bought a car before the check even cleared. Stephanie was shopping for beach houses. My parents had sent a single message: "Have fun in Monaco. Try not to spend too much." As if I had anything to spend. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Grandpa's voice from our last conversation. I'd stopped by his hospital room after everyone else had left, and he'd grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Rose," he'd whispered, "promise me something. Anything, Grandpa. Don't let them make you small. You're stronger than you know." At the time, I thought he was just being sweet, maybe a little delirious from the medication. Now, staring out at the Monaco harbor at 3 in the morning, I wondered if he'd been giving me very specific instructions. Morning came with Mediterranean sunshine streaming through silk curtains. I'd brought exactly one nice outfit for whatever this palace meeting would entail. A navy blue dress I'd bought for business presentations, paired with the good shoes I saved for special occasions. Looking at myself in the ornate mirror, I looked professional but definitely not like someone who belonged in a prince's palace. Then again, maybe that was exactly who Grandpa wanted them to meet. The taxi ride to the prince's palace took 10 minutes through streets that looked like movie sets. Everything was spotless, expensive, and impossibly beautiful. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "First time in Monaco?" he asked in accented English. "Yes, and probably my last," I admitted. "I'm here on family business." He smiled knowingly. Monaco has a way of surprising people. What seems like an ending often becomes a beginning. The palace loomed ahead, all towers and flags and centuries of European history. Tourists clustered around the entrance, taking photos and buying souvenirs. I felt completely ridiculous walking up to the guard with my grandfather's note, but I'd come this far. What's the worst that could happen? They'd laugh at me? Wouldn't be the first time this week. "Excuse me," I said to the uniformed guard. "I'm looking for someone named Henri. Charles Thompson sent me." The guard's expression immediately changed. He spoke rapidly into a radio, then gestured for me to follow him away from the tourist entrance. We walked through a side gate into what looked like a private courtyard, away from cameras and crowds. A man in an expensive suit appeared within minutes. Tall, elegant, with silver hair and the kind of posture that suggested he was used to being important. "Ms. Thompson," he said, extending his hand. "I am Henri Dubois, private secretary to His Serene Highness. Your grandfather spoke of you often. Please follow me." And just like that, I went from tourist with a crazy story to VIP guest being escorted through a palace. Sometimes life really is stranger than fiction. Following Henri through marble corridors lined with centuries-old portraits felt surreal. This wasn't some tourist tour. This was the real palace, where actual royalty lived and conducted business. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head. Rose, stop dreaming so big. Know your place. Well, apparently my place was walking through a prince's palace in Monaco, though I still had no idea why. Henry moved with the confident stride of someone who belonged here completely. We passed rooms with furniture that probably cost more than I'd made in my entire career, art that I recognized from history books, and windows offering glimpses of the Mediterranean that looked like paintings themselves. Your grandfather, Henry said as we walked, was a valued partner of the principality for many years. His business expertise was legendary, but his discretion was even more valuable. Business partner? Discretion? I knew Grandpa was successful, but the way Henri spoke made him sound like some international business mogul instead of the owner of a mid-sized company from Chicago. We stopped at ornate double doors guarded by men in ceremonial uniform. Henry knocked once, then opened them without waiting for air response. Your Serene Highness, Henry announced. Ms. Rose Thompson has arrived. The room beyond was an office, but the kind of office that belonged in a museum. Behind an antique desk sat a man probably in his 40s, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. He stood as I entered, and I suddenly realized I had no idea how to address actual royalty. Your Highness, I said, attempting something that might pass for a curtsy. I'm not really sure why I'm here. Because when in doubt, honesty seemed like the safest policy. He smiled warmly, which immediately put me at ease. Please, call me Albert. And you're here because your grandfather was one of the finest men I've ever known. His death was a tremendous loss. Albert gestured for me to sit in an ornate chair across from his desk. Henry remained standing nearby, like this conversation was somehow important enough to witness officially. Ms. Thompson, Albert continued, what did you know about your grandfather's business dealings outside of Thompson Industries? I shook my head honestly. Nothing, really. I worked for him at a regional office in Chicago. I handled client accounts and project management. I knew he traveled frequently for business, but he never discussed details with any of us. Because apparently, keeping your family in the dark about your secret billionaire lifestyle was just another Tuesday for Grandpa. Albert and Henry exchanged a look that suggested they'd expected this answer. Charles was a very private man, Albert said carefully. He believed in keeping business and family separate for very good reasons. However, he also believed in recognizing true worth when he found it. He opened a folder on his desk and pulled out what looked like legal documents. 4 years ago, your grandfather approached our government with a unique investment opportunity. Monaco's economy, while strong, needed diversification beyond traditional banking and tourism. Charles proposed developing a network of luxury hospitality venues that would attract a different caliber of international business. I nodded, though I had no idea where this was going. That sounds like something he'd be interested in. Indeed. However, the venture required more than just financial investment. It required someone with operational expertise, someone who understood both the hospitality industry and the unique requirements of our clientele. Albert slid a photograph across the desk. It showed a stunning resort complex built into the hillside overlooking the harbor. Modern architecture blended seamlessly with traditional Mediterranean design, surrounded by gardens that looked like something from a fairy tale. The Chateau de Monaco, Albert said. The flagship property of what became a very successful partnership between your grandfather and our principality. The photo was beautiful, but I still didn't understand why I was looking at it. Charles didn't just invest money, Albert continued. He spent considerable time here over the past 4 years, personally overseeing development, staff training, service protocols, and integration with our existing tourism infrastructure. Henry stepped forward slightly. What His Serene Highness is explaining is that your grandfather built something extraordinary here. Albert opened another folder, this one much thicker. The partnership expanded to include 3 additional properties over the following years. The Chateau de Monaco became the anchor for what is now known as the Monaco Crown Collection. He said it like I should recognize the name, but it meant nothing to me. I'm sorry, I said, feeling increasingly lost. I still don't understand what this has to do with me. Albert smiled, but this time there was something almost mischievous in his expression. Ms. Thompson, your grandfather didn't leave you a vacation to Monaco. He left you controlling ownership of the Monaco Crown Collection. The room went completely silent, except for the sound of my heart hammering against my ribs. I'm sorry, what? My voice came out as barely a whisper. Henry produced documents from his briefcase. 4 luxury resort properties, each with exclusive amenities and international clientele. Combined annual revenue last year exceeded 400 million euros. 400 million, with an M. I stared at them like they were speaking a foreign language. Because honestly, at this point they might as well have been. That's impossible, I said weakly. My family inherited millions. I got a plane ticket. Your family inherited what Charles wanted them to inherit from his American assets, Albert said gently. You inherited what you earned through 4 years of proving yourself capable of stewardship rather than consumption. The documents Henri placed in front of me had my name on them. Rose Thompson, majority owner of the Monaco Crown Collection. Signatures, official seals, dates going back over a year. He planned this while he was still healthy, I said, my voice still barely functioning. Charles knew the difference between giving someone money and giving someone responsibility, Albert confirmed. He spent years ensuring you had the skills and character necessary for this role. I looked up from the papers, my mind reeling. But why? Why me? Why not Brad or Stephanie or literally anyone else in my family? Albert leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. How many 18-year-olds do you know who would choose to work instead of accepting handouts? How many people spend 8 years learning a business from the ground up without any guarantee of reward? I just needed a job, I protested. You could have quit any time, Henri added. You could have demanded explanations when your grandfather traveled without you, or complained about being excluded from high-level meetings. But you didn't. You trusted his judgment and focused on excellence. The magnitude of what they were telling me slowly began to sink in. I wasn't just inheriting money or property. I was inheriting a business empire worth more than my entire family's combined inheritance, multiplied by about 20. And apparently I'd been training for this job for 8 years without knowing it. This is insane, I whispered. This, Albert said with a grin, is just the beginning. Albert stood and walked to the windows, overlooking the harbor. Would you like to see your properties, Ms. Thompson? Your properties. The words hit me like physical objects. An hour ago, I'd been an unemployed woman with $400 and a mysterious plane ticket. Now I apparently owned luxury resorts worth hundreds of millions. I think I need to process this first, I said, though I was already overwhelmed. Henry poured water from a crystal pitcher into an equally elegant glass and handed it to me. The transition can feel overwhelming, he said kindly. Your grandfather anticipated this reaction. He pulled another envelope from his briefcase, this one with my name written in Grandpa's careful handwriting. At this point, I was starting to wonder if he'd written me a letter for every possible emotional state. He asked me to give you this after we explained the inheritance. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter, 2 pages of Grandpa's distinctive script. My dear Rose, it began. If you're reading this, then Henri and Albert have just turned your world upside down. I imagine you're feeling confused, possibly angry, and definitely overwhelmed. Good. That means you're taking this seriously. I looked up to find both men watching me with patient expressions. Should I read this privately? Charles asked that you read it here, Albert said. He wanted us to answer any questions you might have immediately. I continued reading, my grandfather's voice echoing in my mind with every word. For 8 years, you've shown me something your cousins never could. Genuine integrity. Not once did you ask for special treatment because you were my granddaughter. Not once did you expect rewards you hadn't earned. When other family members complained about their allowances or demanded explanations for my business decisions, you simply did your job and did it excellently. Tears started forming in my eyes, but I kept reading. The Monaco Crown Collection isn't just a business, Rose. It's a legacy built on specific principles. Excellence without arrogance, luxury without waste, profit with purpose. These aren't just hotels. They're institutions that employ hundreds of people and contribute meaningfully to Monaco's economy. The weight of responsibility hit me like a physical force. This wasn't just about money. People's livelihoods depended on these businesses. I know you feel unprepared, but you're not. Everything you've learned, every decision you've made, every crisis you've handled, all of it was preparation for this moment. You have the instincts, the work ethic, and most importantly, the character to steward this properly. My voice broke as I read the final paragraph aloud. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for this inheritance. You earned it through 8 years of dedication, while others felt entitled to handouts. Your cousins inherited money. You inherited responsibility. Use it to build something even better than what I'm leaving you. I love you, and I'm proud of the woman you've become, Grandpa. The room was quiet for several minutes while I processed everything. Finally, Albert broke the silence. Your grandfather also left detailed transition plans. The properties currently have excellent management teams in place, so you won't be thrown into the deep end immediately. However, he believed strongly that owners should understand their businesses intimately. Henri opened a tablet and showed me what looked like an extensive schedule. We've arranged a comprehensive orientation over the next 3 weeks. You'll meet with department heads, review operational procedures, and begin learning the systems your grandfather established. 3 weeks. In Monaco. Daesh. learning to run a business empire worth hundreds of millions, because apparently my life had turned into some kind of fever dream. What if I can't do it? I asked, voicing the fear that was consuming me. What if I mess this up? Albert smiled. Charles anticipated that question too. He established a board of advisors, including myself and Henri, to provide guidance during your first year. You won't be navigating this alone. Also, Henri added, the properties are profitable and well managed. You're not inheriting problems, you're inheriting success. Your job is to maintain and build upon what's already working. Albert walked back to his desk and pulled out one final folder. However, there is one immediate decision you need to make. Inside the folder were business proposals and partnership agreements from several international hotel groups. Your grandfather passed away before finalizing these expansion opportunities, Albert explained. Several companies have expressed interest in joint ventures. These decisions will require your approval as majority owner. I stared at the documents, feeling completely out of my depth. I don't know anything about international business deals. You know more than you think, Henri said confidently, and you have excellent advisors. But first, perhaps you'd like to see exactly what you've inherited? 30 minutes later, we were in a sleek black car winding through Monaco's pristine streets. Albert sat beside me, pointing out landmarks, while Henri made phone calls in French, presumably arranging my property tours. The first stop, Albert said as we pulled up to the most beautiful hotel I'd ever seen, is the Château de Monaco, your flagship property. The building rose from manicured gardens like something from a dream, modern elegance blended with classic Mediterranean architecture, every detail designed to suggest both luxury and comfort. Guests in designer clothes moved through the lobby, while staff attended to their every need with choreographed precision. A woman in an impeccable suit approached our car as we arrived. Ms. Thompson, she said with a warm smile, I'm Catherine Moreau, general manager of the chateau. Your grandfather spoke of you often. Welcome home. Welcome home. The words sent chills down my spine. This impossible, beautiful place was apparently mine now. Well, mine and whoever those international partners were. But still. As we walked through the lobby, Catherine began explaining the business. We maintain a 92% occupancy rate year-round. Our clientele includes business leaders, celebrities, and dignitaries who value discretion as much as luxury. Each suite is designed to serve as a private retreat while providing access to Monaco's business and social opportunities. She led us to the restaurant where the chef was personally preparing what looked like art on plates worth more than my monthly rent had been. Our culinary program has earned 2 Michelin stars. Reservations are typically booked 3 months in advance. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. This couldn't possibly be real. Catherine, I said, stopping in the middle of the marble-floored lobby, can I ask you something honestly? Of course. Do you think I can actually do this? Run all of this? Catherine studied my face for a moment, then smiled with genuine warmth. Ms. Thompson, your grandfather was the most discerning man I've ever met. If he believed you were ready, then you're ready. But more importantly, you don't have to do it alone. Every person working here wants these properties to succeed. By evening, we toured 2 more properties, the Monaco Bay Resort, which featured an exclusive casino and spa, and Hotel Royale, a boutique property that catered to business travelers who expected perfection in every detail. Each location was flawless. Each management team was professional and welcoming. Each financial report showed consistent profitability that made my head spin. Sitting in my suite that night, surrounded by documents and business plans, I called the one person who might help me process everything that had happened. Emma, I said when my college roommate answered, you're not going to believe what just happened to me. Rose, it's 2 a.m. here. Are you okay? Emma's voice was thick with sleep and concern. I was standing on my suite's balcony, looking out at yachts that cost more than most people made in a lifetime, trying to figure out how to explain that I'd apparently become the owner of a luxury hotel empire overnight. Emma, I need you to promise me something. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound completely insane, but I need you to just listen and not hang up on me. Okay, now you're scaring me. What's going on? Remember how my family laughed when I inherited just a plane ticket to Monaco while everyone else got millions? I took a deep breath. Well, turns out the plane ticket wasn't my whole inheritance. I just spent the day touring luxury resorts that I apparently own. Silence. Then, Rose, honey, are you having some kind of breakdown? Because if you are, I can fly out there. I couldn't blame her for skepticism. 24 hours ago, I would have reacted the same way. I'm not having a breakdown. I spent today meeting with the Prince of Monaco and learning that Grandpa secretly built a hotel empire here over the past 4 years. I have a general manager named Catherine who keeps calling me Ms. Thompson like I'm some kind of business executive. The Prince of Monaco? Rose, this sounds like a really elaborate fantasy. Emma, I'm going to text you some photos. Just look at them and tell me what you think. I sent her pictures I'd taken throughout the day. The chateau's lobby, the casino at Monaco Bay, the view from Hotel Royale's penthouse suite. Then I sent the one that would convince her. A selfie of me with Albert in his palace office, both of us smiling while holding the inheritance documents. My phone rang within 30 seconds. Oh my God, Rose, oh my God. That's really you with an actual prince? And those hotels are actually yours? According to approximately 50 legal documents, yes. Along with a management team that apparently thinks I know what I'm doing. Which was hilarious, considering I'd been unemployed 12 hours ago. I explained everything Albert and Henry had told me, about Grandpa's secret partnership with Monaco, about the 8 years of testing my character, about inheriting responsibility instead of just money. So your family is going to lose their minds when they find out, Emma said when I finished. That's what I'm afraid of. They already think I'm the family disappointment. When they learn I inherited more than all of them combined, they're going to go absolutely nuclear. Who cares? Rose, you just inherited a business empire worth hundreds of millions. You can afford not to care what they think anymore. She was right. But old habits die hard. I'd spent 26 years seeking approval from people who saw me as an afterthought. The idea of suddenly having more power than all of them combined felt surreal. The next morning, Catherine arrived at my suite with what she called orientation materials. It turned out to be a comprehensive education in running hospitality businesses. Your grandfather believed in understanding every aspect of the operation, she explained, spreading financial reports across the dining table. These numbers represent years of careful work, but they're also your starting point. The numbers were impressive but manageable. The chateau alone generated about 120 million euros in annual revenue. The other properties brought in another 150 million combined. Profitable, but not the insane billions my family would probably imagine. How much of this do I actually need to understand immediately? I asked, feeling overwhelmed by spreadsheets full of data. Less than you think, Catherine said reassuringly. Each property has department heads who handle day-to-day operations. Your role is strategic oversight and major decision-making. However, your grandfather insisted that owners should understand their businesses intimately. We spent the morning reviewing operational procedures, staff management, guest relations, financial controls, regulatory compliance. Each system was precisely designed and efficiently managed. Catherine, can I ask you something? How did my grandfather handle all this while still running Thompson Industries back home? She smiled. He transitioned Thompson Industries to his management team about 2 years ago and focused primarily on the Monaco properties. He spent approximately 4 months per year here, personally overseeing everything. 4 months per year, for 2 years. While my family thought he was taking occasional business trips, he'd been essentially living a double life in Monaco. Did he ever mention plans for succession? Before he got sick, I mean? Catherine's expression became thoughtful. He spoke often about finding the right person to continue the work. Someone with integrity, work ethic, and genuine care for excellence. He never mentioned it would be family until about 18 months ago. What changed 18 months ago? He received reports about your performance managing some challenging client situations in Chicago. Apparently, you'd implemented solutions that impressed him greatly. He said you approached problems the way he did. Methodically, ethically, with focus on long-term success. I remembered those projects. Difficult clients, complex logistics, systems that needed complete overhauls. It had been challenging work, but satisfying to solve problems systematically. That afternoon, Henri took me to meet with the Monaco Bay Resort's management team. The casino operations were particularly complex, involving not just gaming, but high-end entertainment, exclusive dining, and VIP services for international clientele. Marcus Webb, the casino director, explained their approach. We're not just running games of chance, he said. We're providing sophisticated entertainment for people who have unlimited options. Our success depends on creating experiences they can't find anywhere else. The VIP lounge looked like something from a James Bond film. Private gaming rooms where business deals were conducted alongside card games, exclusive dining areas where celebrities could eat without being photographed, and service standards that anticipated needs before guests expressed them. The key, Marcus explained, is discretion. Many of our clients are public figures who value privacy as much as luxury. We don't just provide gaming, we provide sanctuary. Watching the operations, I began to understand what Grandpa had built. This wasn't just about hospitality or entertainment. It was about creating spaces where powerful people could conduct business, relax, and socialize without external pressures. Ms. Thompson, Marcus said as we concluded the tour, your grandfather often said that true luxury isn't about showing off wealth. It's about providing genuine comfort and peace of mind. That philosophy guides everything we do here. That evening, I sat in my suite reviewing everything I'd learned, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd inherited. Not just money or property, but responsibility for hundreds of employees, and a business philosophy that had taken years to develop. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Brad. "How's your consolation prize vacation going? Don't blow all your spending money in the casino. LOL." I stared at the message for a long time, trying to decide how to respond. Part of me wanted to text back a photo of the casino I now owned, just to see his reaction, but Grandpa's letter had emphasized discretion, and I was beginning to understand why. Instead, I texted back, "Having a great time, learning a lot." Let him think I was just playing tourist. Soon enough, he'd learn the truth. But for now, I had more important things to focus on than my family's reactions. Because apparently, I had a business empire to learn how to run. And honestly, I was starting to think I might actually be good at it. The third week of my orientation brought challenges that made me realize inheritance was just the beginning. Catherine had arranged meetings with business partners, government officials, and industry leaders who all expected me to seamlessly step into Grandpa's role. "The tourism board meeting is this afternoon," Catherine said over coffee in my suite. "They'll want to discuss next season's promotional initiatives and the proposed expansion of conference facilities." I nearly choked on my coffee. "They want me to discuss government tourism policy?" "Catherine, I've been a business owner for exactly 2 weeks. 3 weeks ago, I was worried about making rent." "Which is precisely why you'll do well," she said calmly. "Your grandfather always said the best business leaders are those who remember what it's like to worry about money. It keeps you focused on what actually matters." The tourism board meeting was held in a conference room overlooking the harbor, with officials who switched seamlessly between English and French. I sat at a massive mahogany table, trying to project confidence I definitely didn't feel. Minister Laurent, the head of tourism development, presented plans for expanding Monaco's appeal to international business conferences. "The Monaco Crown Collection properties would be central to this initiative," he explained. "Your conference facilities are the most sophisticated in the region." I reviewed the proposal while 8 people watched my reaction. The plan would require significant investment in new technology and facility upgrades, but the potential revenue increases were substantial. "What's the timeline for implementation?" I asked, trying to sound like someone who made major business decisions regularly, instead of someone who'd learned what revenue projections meant 2 weeks ago. "Ideally, we'd begin construction this winter and complete renovations before the spring conference season." I looked at Catherine, who nodded slightly. We'd discussed capital expenditures extensively over the past week. The Monaco Crown Collection's finances could easily support this level of investment. "I'd like to review detailed cost projections and get input from our department heads," I said. "But conceptually, I think this aligns well with our growth strategy." Minister Laurent smiled broadly. "Excellent. Charles always said you had excellent business instincts." After the meeting, Catherine and I walked along the harbor while I processed what had just happened. "Catherine, I just committed to a multi-million-euro construction project, and I have no idea if I made the right decision." "You made exactly the decision your grandfather would have made," she assured me. "Measured consideration, input from experienced staff, focus on long-term growth rather than short-term concerns. That's precisely how good business decisions get made." That afternoon brought my first real crisis. Henri called my suite, his usually calm voice edged with concern. "Rose, we have a situation that requires immediate attention. There's been an incident at Hotel Royale involving a VIP guest and potential media exposure." 15 minutes later, I was in Hotel Royale's private conference room with Henri, the hotel manager, and a woman who looked like she handled crises professionally. "Ms. Thompson," the hotel manager explained, "one of our long-term guests, a prominent European businessman, had what appears to be a medical emergency in his suite last night. He's fine, but there were circumstances that could create complications if media learns about them." I was starting to understand the implications. "You're saying someone important was in a potentially compromising situation at my hotel?" "Potentially," Henri said carefully. "We've maintained complete discretion, but if media learns about the incident, it could create significant problems both for our guest and for our reputation." The crisis manager, Nicole, presented our options. "We can continue maintaining silence and hope nothing leaks. We can proactively contact the guest's representatives to coordinate our response. Or we can prepare statements that minimize potential damage if the story breaks. 3 options, each with different risks and consequences." I thought about what Grandpa would do, but mostly I thought about what felt right. What's our obligation to protect the guest's privacy versus our obligation to protect the hotel's reputation and our staff? I asked. "Your grandfather always prioritized discretion," Henri said. "VIP guests trusted him to protect their privacy absolutely. But if maintaining that discretion puts our staff at legal risk or damages our credibility long-term, that's a different calculation," Nicole added. I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. Contact the guests' representatives directly. Offer to coordinate our response to minimize damage for everyone involved. If they're reasonable and cooperative, we protect everyone's interests. If they're not, we prioritize our staff and guests' safety over anyone's political considerations. Nicole nodded approvingly. That's exactly the right approach. Professional, ethical, and protective of your real responsibilities. The crisis resolved within hours. The guests' team was grateful for our discretion and cooperative approach. No media coverage emerged, and we established a precedent for handling sensitive situations professionally. That was masterfully handled, Henri told me afterward. You balanced competing interests perfectly. I just did what felt right, I said, though internally, I was amazed I'd managed to navigate international crisis management without completely embarrassing myself. That evening, I was reviewing expansion proposals when my phone rang, an unknown number with a Chicago area code. Hello? Rose, it's Brad. My cousin's voice sounded strange, less cocky than usual. Hey, Brad, what's up? I've been thinking about Grandpa's will. Some things aren't adding up. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I hired a lawyer to look into the estate. Turns out Grandpa's business assets were way larger than what we inherited. Like, way larger? I'm trying to figure out what happened to the rest. I chose my words carefully. Maybe he had business obligations or debts you don't know about. That's what I thought, but my lawyer says there were significant asset transfers that happened before death. Legal transfers that aren't accounted for in the American will. The pieces were falling into place. Brad had discovered that Grandpa's wealth extended far beyond what the family inherited, and he was trying to figure out where the missing assets had gone. Brad, maybe you should talk to the estate lawyer directly instead of speculating. I did. He said all distributions were handled according to specific instructions, and everything was completely legal. But Rose, we're talking about potentially hundreds of millions that just disappeared from the estate. I closed my eyes, knowing this conversation was inevitable, but hoping I'd have more time to prepare. Maybe Grandpa had private business ventures or investments you don't know about. Rich people have complex financial structures. Maybe. Or maybe someone in the family got a lot more than the rest of us, and we just don't know it yet. The accusation hung in the air between us. Brad suspected someone had received a secret inheritance, but he didn't know it was me. Yet. Brad, I think you're overcomplicating this. Business assets and personal assets are different things. Maybe what you're seeing is just complex corporate structures. You're probably right, he said, but his tone suggested he wasn't convinced. I just want to make sure everything was fair, you know? Fair. The irony was overwhelming. My family's definition of fair had never included treating me as an equal, but now they were concerned about equitable distribution of an inheritance they'd mocked me for not receiving. I'm sure everything was handled properly, I said. Grandpa always did things by the book. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony, looking out at the harbor where expensive yachts bobbed gently in the evening breeze. Brad's investigation was the beginning of what I knew would eventually become a family storm. When they discovered the truth about my inheritance, the people who'd spent decades treating me like an afterthought would suddenly become very interested in my opinion. But for now, I had 3 weeks of intensive business education under my belt, a crisis management success to my credit, and the growing confidence that maybe, just maybe, I could actually do this job. The little girl who'd been overlooked at every family gathering was gone. In her place was Rose Thompson, majority owner of the Monaco Crown Collection, and she was just getting started. 2 months after my life turned into something from a movie, I was finally starting to feel like I belonged in boardrooms instead of just pretending. The Monaco Crown Collection's quarterly reports showed solid profits. The tourism board expansion was proceeding smoothly, and I'd successfully navigated 3 partnership negotiations that would have made Grandpa proud. I was reviewing architectural plans for a spa renovation when Henri called with news that made my blood run cold. Rose, your cousin Brad has hired a private investigator. They've been making inquiries about Charles's business activities in Monaco. I set down my coffee carefully, trying to process what this meant. What kind of inquiries? Property records, business registrations, travel documents. They're trying to trace his activities here over the past few years. The inevitable confrontation was finally coming. I'd known this day would arrive since Brad's suspicious phone call a month ago, but somehow I'd convinced myself it might take longer. How much time do we have before they piece everything together? Not long. Monaco's business records are public, and the Monaco Crown Collection's ownership transfers were properly filed. If they're thorough, they'll have answers within days. I walked to my office window, looking down at the chateau's perfectly manicured gardens where guests sipped champagne without a care in the world. Soon, my family would know I owned not just this view, but the building, the land, and 3 other properties like it. Henri, when my family learns the truth, how bad do you think their reaction will be? Henri was quiet for a moment. Your grandfather anticipated this question. He said your family's reaction would depend entirely on whether they're more interested in money or relationships. And what did he think the answer would be? He said if they were more interested in relationships, you wouldn't be standing in his office learning about business inheritances in the first place. The brutal accuracy of that assessment hit like a physical blow. Grandpa had known exactly how this would play out, because he'd spent decades watching my family prioritize money over everything else. That evening, I called Emma to strategize. "Rose, you knew this was coming eventually," she said after I explained the situation. "The question is, are you ready for it?" "I don't know. Part of me still feels like that kid desperately trying to earn their approval. And the other part? I thought about the past 2 months. Successfully managing crisis situations, making important decisions, earning respect from international business leaders who had no idea about my family dynamics. The other part owns a business empire that generates more revenue annually than their entire combined net worth. Because honestly, the math on that was pretty satisfying. There's my girl. Rose, you're not the same person who left Chicago with $400 and a mysterious plane ticket. You've proven you can handle whatever they throw at you." She was right. But old patterns die hard. The thought of facing my family's anger and accusations still made my stomach churn. 2 days later, the call came. "Rose." My mother's voice was ice cold, more furious than I'd ever heard her. "You need to come home immediately." "Hi, Mom. What's wrong?" "Don't play dumb with me. We know." The 3 words I'd been dreading. Know what? "We know about Monaco. We know about the hotels. We know about everything you've been hiding from us." I closed my eyes, trying to center myself the way Catherine had taught me during difficult negotiations. Stay calm, gather information, respond strategically. "I haven't been hiding anything, Mom. I've been learning to manage the inheritance Grandpa left me." "Inheritance?" Her voice reached a pitch that probably scared nearby wildlife. "You call stealing millions from your family an inheritance?" "I didn't steal anything. Grandpa made his own decisions about his assets. Because apparently, making smart business decisions for your own money counts as theft when your family feels entitled to it. Assets that should have been distributed equally among his grandchildren, not hoarded by one selfish girl who manipulated a dying old man." The accusation was so far from reality, it was almost funny. Manipulated? I'd spent 8 years working harder than any of them while asking for nothing beyond my salary. "Mom, I never asked Grandpa for anything beyond my paycheck. I had no idea this inheritance existed until Henri explained it to me." "Henri? You mean the man who helped you orchestrate this whole scheme?" I could hear voices in the background. The entire family was apparently gathered for this confrontation, probably planning their strategy like some kind of dysfunctional war council. Because nothing says loving family like a group planning session to attack the one member who actually worked for what she got. There was no scheme. Grandpa made these arrangements years ago, completely independently. "We're flying to Monaco tomorrow," Mom announced. "All of us. And you're going to explain exactly how you stole our inheritance, and then you're going to fix this." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat in my office for several minutes processing the conversation. They weren't coming to understand or congratulate me. They were coming to demand what they believed was rightfully theirs. Henri knocked on my door within the hour. "I assume you've heard from your family? They're flying here tomorrow to confront me about stealing their inheritance." Charles anticipated this reaction precisely. He left very specific instructions for this scenario. Henri handed me another envelope with my name in Grandpa's handwriting. At this point, I was starting to wonder if he'd written contingency letters for every possible family crisis. The man was apparently a master of long-term planning. "My dear Rose," the letter began, "if you're reading this, your family has discovered your inheritance and reacted exactly as I expected. They're probably accusing you of manipulation, theft, or worse. They've likely hired lawyers and are demanding explanations that will satisfy their sense of entitlement." Even from beyond the grave, Grandpa understood my family better than I did. What they don't understand is that this inheritance was never about money. It was about finding someone worthy of responsibility. You earn this through character, not birthright. However, they will never accept this explanation because accepting it would require acknowledging their own choices over the past 8 years. The letter continued with detailed instructions for handling their confrontation, including legal documentation proving every aspect of the inheritance was legitimate and planned years in advance. "Remember, Rose, you owe them no explanations beyond what's legally required. You owe them no apologies for gifts they were never entitled to receive. Most importantly, you owe them no access to assets you've earned through years of dedication." That night, I prepared for their arrival with the same systematic approach I'd learned to apply to business challenges. Catherine arranged a conference room at the chateau for the meeting. Victoria, the legal counsel Grandpa had recommended, flew in from Paris with documentation supporting every aspect of the inheritance structure. The key, Victoria explained during our preparation meeting, is maintaining control of the narrative. They'll try to make this emotional, accusatory, personal. You keep it factual, legal, and professional. What if they threaten to sue? Let them. Every document supporting this inheritance was prepared by the most respected legal minds in Monaco and France. Any legal challenge would be expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately unsuccessful. As I finally fell asleep in my suite that night, I realized something had fundamentally shifted inside me. 2 months ago, the thought of my family's anger would have sent me into panic mode, desperately searching for ways to appease them. Now I felt something closer to pity. They were so focused on what they believed they deserved that they couldn't see what they'd actually lost. A relationship with the one family member who genuinely cared about them despite everything. What do you think will happen next? My family arrived in Monaco like an invasion force. Brad, Stephanie, my parents, and even Uncle Robert, who'd apparently taken time off work to join their mission of reclaiming what they considered stolen money. I watched from my office window as they climbed out of taxis at the chateau's main entrance, their expressions ranging from barely contained rage to obvious awe at the property's magnificence. Stephanie actually stopped mid-stride to stare at the lobby's crystal chandeliers before remembering she was supposed to be furious. Because nothing says righteous indignation quite like pausing to gawk at expensive decor. They'd demanded a meeting at 2 p.m. sharp, as if I were an employee they could summon rather than the owner of the building they were standing in. I'd agreed to the time but set my own terms. Professional conference room, legal counsel present, hotel security nearby. Catherine escorted them to the conference room while I made final preparations with Victoria. Through the security monitors, I could watch my family's reactions as they realized exactly how luxurious my little inheritance actually was. "Rose," Victoria said, reviewing her notes, "remember that you control this meeting. You're not defending yourself against accusations. You're informing them of facts they apparently didn't understand." At exactly 2 p.m., I walked into the conference room. My family sat on one side of the mahogany table like opposing counsel, their faces a mixture of anger, greed, and barely concealed amazement at their surroundings. "Thank you for coming," I said calmly, taking my seat across from them. "I understand you have questions about Grandpa's business arrangements." "Questions?" Brad's voice cracked with indignation. "We have a lot more than questions, Rose. We have proof that you manipulated our dying grandfather into giving you assets worth hundreds of millions that should have been distributed among all of us." I slid copies of the inheritance documents across the table. "These papers detail exactly how Grandpa's assets were distributed. Everything was handled according to his explicit instructions, prepared years before his death." Mom picked up the documents, her hands shaking with rage. "This says you inherited business assets worth over 400 million euros. 400 million, Rose. While the rest of us got a few million each. That's correct. Because honestly, what else was there to say? How is that fair?" Stephanie's voice pitched higher with each word. "How is giving one person almost everything while the rest of us get scraps even remotely fair?" I looked around the table at faces I'd known my entire life, people who'd never once considered whether their treatment of me had been fair. "Stephanie, when was the last time you asked whether anything in our family was fair? When you got a brand new car for your 16th birthday while I worked part-time to buy my own? When Mom and Dad paid for your college while I relied on scholarships and loans? When you all went on vacations I couldn't afford to join?" "That's completely different," Dad interjected. "That was parenting. This is inheritance." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like Grandpa applying the same principles you did. Rewards based on effort and character rather than just existing and expecting handouts." Uncle Robert leaned forward aggressively. "You're trying to tell us you deserve more than everyone else combined?" "I'm telling you that Grandpa made his own decisions about his own assets. Decisions based on 8 years of watching how each of us handled responsibility. While you all treated him like a personal ATM, I might add, but I kept that observation to myself," Victoria smoothly interjected. "Perhaps we should review the timeline of these arrangements." She opened her briefcase and pulled out additional documentation. The Monaco Crown Collection Partnership began 4 years ago. The inheritance structure was finalized 2 years ago. Every aspect was planned and documented well before Charles Thompson's final illness. 2 years ago? Mom's face went pale. "He planned this 2 years ago?" "According to these documents," Victoria continued, "Mr. Thompson spent considerable time evaluating each grandchild's character, work ethic, and approach to responsibility. His decision was based on observable patterns over multiple years." Brad slammed his hand on the table. "This is ridiculous. She's not more deserving than the rest of us just because she worked for him. Actually, I said quietly, let me ask you something, Brad. In the 8 years I worked for Grandpa, how many times did you visit him at the office? How many times did you ask about his business or offer to help with anything? Brad's face reddened, but he didn't answer. I'll tell you. 0. You visited 0 times. You never asked about his work, his challenges, his goals, or his health unless it was Christmas or his birthday and you needed money for something. I turned to Stephanie. What about you? When did you last have a conversation with Grandpa that wasn't about money you needed or problems you wanted him to solve? The silence was deafening. Here's what you all don't understand, I continued, feeling 8 years of suppressed frustration finally finding its voice. This inheritance wasn't a gift. It was recognition of a relationship you chose not to build. That's not true, Mom protested weakly. We all loved your grandfather. Did you? Because love involves interest, effort, and presence. When was the last time any of you spent time with Grandpa when you weren't asking for something? Victoria placed additional documents on the table. These are detailed records of interactions between Charles Thompson and each family member over the past 8 years. Visits, phone calls, business discussions, personal conversations. The pages showed exactly what I'd described. Years of one-sided relationships where my family contacted Grandpa only when they needed something, while I'd built genuine connection through shared work and mutual respect. This is ridiculous. Uncle Robert stood up abruptly. We're not going to sit here and be lectured by someone who stole our inheritance through manipulation. Uncle Robert, I said calmly, if you believe any laws were broken, you're welcome to pursue legal action. However, you should know that every aspect of this inheritance has been reviewed by Monaco's financial oversight authorities, French legal experts, and international business law specialists. Victoria nodded. Any legal challenge would be expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately unsuccessful. These transfers were made between living parties, properly documented, and completely legal under both Monaco and international law. Are you threatening us? Dad asked. I'm informing you of facts. You can choose to accept them and focus on your own substantial inheritances, or you can spend years and hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees fighting a case you cannot win. The room fell quiet except for the sound of papers rustling as my family reviewed documents that proved everything I'd told them. Finally, Brad looked up from the paperwork. So what happens now? You just keep everything while we get nothing? You got exactly what Grandpa intended you to have. Several $1,000,000 each, which most people would consider life-changing wealth. But not hundreds of millions, Stephanie said bitterly. No, not hundreds of millions. Because hundreds of millions come with responsibility you've never demonstrated any interest in accepting. Mom gathered the documents with sharp, angry movements. This isn't over, Rose. Family should stick together, and what you've done is selfish and cruel. I felt a strange sense of clarity as she spoke. Mom, you're absolutely right that family should stick together. I spent 26 years hoping you'd remember that. They left without another word, their anger filling the conference room like smoke even after they were gone. Victoria began organizing her papers. That went exactly as expected. They'll likely consult with lawyers back home, but no competent attorney will take this case. How can you be so sure? Because your grandfather was exceptionally thorough. Every document was prepared by the best legal minds available. Every decision was documented with clear rationale, and every potential challenge was anticipated and addressed. That evening, I sat on the chateau's terrace, watching the sunset paint Monaco's harbor in shades of gold and pink. Catherine had arranged a quiet dinner to help me decompress from the family confrontation. How do you feel? She asked, pouring wine into crystal glasses. Honestly, relieved. I spent weeks dreading this moment, but it wasn't as terrible as I'd imagined. Sometimes anticipating conflict is worse than the conflict itself. What surprised me most was realizing I wasn't angry at them. I felt sorry for them. Catherine raised her glass. That's the difference between maturity and resentment. Your grandfather would be proud. 2 weeks after my family's confrontational visit, I learned they hadn't given up as easily as I'd hoped. Henry called while I was reviewing plans for the spa renovation, his voice carrying news that made my stomach drop. Rose, your family has retained a law firm in Chicago. They're preparing to challenge the inheritance on multiple grounds. I set down my pen carefully. What grounds? Undue influence, potential fraud, and something called constructive trust. Their strategy appears to be throwing every possible legal theory at the wall and hoping something sticks. Victoria arrived from Paris that afternoon with a briefcase full of counter-strategies and reassurances. We met in my office while summer rain drummed against the windows, creating a cozy atmosphere that felt completely at odds with the legal warfare being planned against me. The good news? Victoria said. spreading documents across my coffee table, is that we anticipated exactly these challenges. Your grandfather was almost paranoid about protecting this inheritance from family disputes. She pulled out a thick folder labeled Succession Planning, Family Litigation Contingencies. Charles had medical evaluations performed annually for his final 3 years, specifically documenting his mental clarity and decision-making capacity. We have video recordings of him explaining his reasoning, made 18 months before his death when he was clearly competent. I picked up one of the medical reports. He really thought of everything, more than you know. He also documented every interaction with family members, every request for money, every instance where relatives showed more interest in his wealth than his well-being. Victoria opened her laptop and showed me a spreadsheet that made my heart sink. It tracked 8 years of family interactions with brutal precision: dates, participants, topics discussed, requests made, follow-up actions taken. Rose, Victoria said gently, this data tells a very clear story about who invested in genuine relationships versus who treated your grandfather as a source of funding. The numbers were devastating. Brad had contacted Grandpa 38 times in 8 years. 35 of those contacts involved requests for money. Stephanie's record was even worse: 29 contacts, 27 financial requests. My record showed the opposite pattern: hundreds of interactions, the vast majority work-related or purely personal conversations with no requests for anything. But the most important protection, Victoria continued, is the structure itself. The Monaco Crown Collection isn't just an inheritance, it's an active business partnership with the Principality of Monaco. Disrupting that partnership would require not just American legal action, but international cooperation that simply isn't available. Over the following days, Henri provided regular updates on my family's legal maneuvering. They'd hired investigators to research my relationship with Grandpa, looking for evidence of manipulation or coercion. They'd contacted Monaco's authorities claiming I was hiding assets that should have been part of the American estate. Each attempt failed more spectacularly than the last. American courts have no jurisdiction over Monaco business partnerships that were established years ago, Henri explained during one of our daily briefings, and Monaco's authorities found their claims so baseless they declined to even open an investigation. But the psychological toll was exhausting. Knowing my own family was actively trying to destroy my life, spending tens of thousands of dollars on lawyers to take away something I'd earned through years of dedication. Emma called regularly to provide support and perspective. Rose, you have to stop taking this personally. How can I not take it personally? These are people I've loved my entire life and they're treating me like a criminal? Because they can't accept that you succeeded where they failed. It's easier to believe you cheated than to acknowledge their own choices. She paused. Plus, let's be honest, your success is making them look pretty bad by comparison. What if they actually find some legal loophole? What if some court decides I don't deserve this inheritance? Then you'll still be Rose Thompson, the woman who successfully managed a multi-million-euro business empire for months. The woman who earned respect from international leaders and made decisions that improved people's lives. That's not something anyone can take away from you. Emma was right, but the constant legal pressure was affecting my work. I found myself second-guessing decisions, worried that anything I did might be used as evidence against me later. Catherine noticed my distraction during a department heads meeting. Rose, you seem preoccupied. Is everything all right? I explained my concerns about the ongoing legal threats and their potential impact on the business. May I make a suggestion? She said after I finished. Your grandfather faced similar family pressure when he first established the Monaco partnerships. His approach was to focus entirely on business success, letting excellent results speak louder than family accusations. What do you mean? The Monaco Crown Collection's performance under your leadership has been exceptional. Revenue is up 12%, guest satisfaction ratings have improved across all properties, and your business decisions have earned praise from Monaco's tourism board. She pulled out a folder containing recent business reports. You've proven your capabilities through results, not words. That's the strongest possible defense against any accusations of incompetence or manipulation. Catherine was right. While my family spent their energy on legal attacks, I'd been building something meaningful. The spa renovation was ahead of schedule and under budget. The conference facility expansion had attracted 2 major international events. Staff morale was higher than it had been in years. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Henri arrived at my office with a grim expression and a folder full of legal documents. Rose, your family's law firm has escalated their strategy. They're no longer just challenging the inheritance. They're attempting to have you declared mentally incompetent to manage the assets. I stared at him in disbelief. They're what? Their petition claims you're suffering from psychological manipulation that renders you incapable of making rational decisions about inherited assets. The accusation was so outrageous it was almost funny. Henri, I've been successfully running a business empire for months. How can anyone claim I'm mentally incompetent? Because they're desperate. Every other legal strategy has failed, so they're resorting to character assassination. Victoria arrived that afternoon with news that made me realize just how serious this had become. Rose, I need you to understand something. If they succeed with this competency challenge, even temporarily, it could trigger automatic asset protection measures while courts conduct evaluations. How long would that process take? Months, possibly longer, during which time you'd be unable to make major business decisions, sign contracts, or access certain accounts. The implications hit me like a physical blow. My family was willing to damage the business empire Grandpa had built, risk hundreds of employees' livelihoods, and disrupt Monaco's tourism partnerships, all to get money they believed they deserved. What do we do? Victoria smiled with the confidence of someone who'd anticipated this exact scenario. We use your grandfather's final contingency plan, the one he hoped we'd never need, but prepared just in case your family became truly desperate. Victoria's briefcase contained what looked like enough legal documentation to fill a small library. Your grandfather called this the comprehensive response, she said, spreading papers across my office floor because the desk wasn't large enough. He hoped it would never be necessary, but he knew your family well enough to prepare for the worst possible scenario. I picked up a folder marked Family Financial History, Confidential. Inside were bank records, legal documents, and what looked like private investigator reports spanning decades. Rose, what I'm about to show you will fundamentally change how you view your family's relationship with your grandfather. Are you prepared for that? I nodded, though I wasn't sure anything could be more devastating than watching my relatives try to have me declared mentally incompetent. The first document was a series of bank transfers from 15 years ago. Brad had gotten into serious financial trouble during college, gambling debts that had escalated to the point where he was receiving threats. Mysterious payments had cleared his debts just before legal action began. Grandpa was bailing him out? I whispered. Every few months for years? Brad never knew where the payments came from, but he never questioned them either. The next file contained records showing that Stephanie had defaulted on multiple credit cards and car loans over the past decade. Each time, payments appeared from anonymous sources, just before collections agencies got involved. But the folder that made my hands shake contained documents about my parents. Business loans, mortgage payments, tax obligations, all showing a pattern of financial rescue payments from Thompson Business Trust. My parents have been receiving financial assistance for years, I said, my voice barely audible. They never told me. Your grandfather provided over $2 million in combined assistance to your family members over the past decade, Victoria said gently. Each instance involved preventing serious financial consequences for poor decision-making. I stared at the paperwork, trying to process the implications. While I'd been working multiple jobs to afford college and living expenses, my family had been secretly receiving hundreds of thousands in assistance from Grandpa. There's more, Victoria said gently. The final folder contained what looked like a complete financial audit of my entire extended family. Investment losses, business failures, legal settlements, every major financial crisis my relatives had faced over the past decade, all quietly resolved through assistance that I now realized had come from Grandpa. He saved all of them, I said. Multiple times. And here's what makes this information legally powerful, Victoria continued. Each instance of assistance came with conditions that your family agreed to but never fulfilled. She showed me signed agreements where Brad promised to attend financial counseling, Stephanie committed to debt management programs, and my parents agreed to business oversight. None of these promises had been kept. Furthermore, Victoria continued, each assistance package included clauses stating that future inheritance considerations would depend on demonstrated financial responsibility and family relationship quality. I stared at the contracts my family had signed without apparently reading carefully. They agreed to conditions that would affect their inheritances, conditions they violated repeatedly. Legally speaking, they disqualified themselves from larger inheritance claims through their own documented actions. My phone buzzed with a text from Brad. Our lawyers say you can't hide behind international law forever. We'll get what's rightfully ours. I showed the message to Victoria, who laughed. Perfect timing. This documentation will not only defeat their claims, but potentially expose them to sanctions for frivolous litigation based on false statements. That evening, Henri arranged a strategy session with Victoria and Monaco's legal representatives. The conference room overlooked the harbor where luxury yachts were lit up like floating palaces. The plan, Victoria explained, is simple but devastating. We present evidence that Rose has successfully managed substantial business operations, while her family has consistently demonstrated financial irresponsibility, requiring repeated intervention. What about the mental competency claims? I asked. We have medical evaluations, psychological assessments, business performance reviews, and testimony from international leaders who've worked with you. Their case will collapse within hours. Monaco's chief legal counsel, a distinguished man named Philippe, added his perspective. More importantly, their attempts to interfere with Monaco-based business partnerships through American legal action constitute a serious breach of international business protocol. Our government is prepared to respond appropriately if this harassment continues. What does that mean for my family? It means, Philippe said with a slight smile, that their legal team is about to discover that some fights are much bigger than they anticipated. The next morning, I woke up feeling calmer than I had in weeks. Today would end the legal warfare once and for all. My family would finally learn the truth about their own financial history and their grandfather's years of secret support. Catherine brought coffee and croissants to my suite, along with the morning's business reports. Ready for this to be over? More than ready. For the first time since this started, I feel like we're the ones holding all the cards. Your grandfather always said the truth was the strongest possible weapon in any conflict. I looked out at the Mediterranean, where morning sun was turning the water into liquid gold. Catherine, do you think my family will ever understand why Grandpa made the choice he did? Understanding would require accepting responsibility for their own actions. Some people simply aren't capable of that level of honesty. She was right. My family's entire identity was built around being victims of circumstances beyond their control. Accepting that they'd created their own financial problems would mean acknowledging they'd wasted decades blaming others for their failures. The legal response was scheduled to be filed that afternoon. I sat in the chateau's legal conference room, surrounded by the best legal representation available, preparing to end this war once and for all. My family had no idea what was about to hit them. The phone call from my family's attorney came at exactly 3 p.m. Monaco time. Victoria answered on speakerphone while Henri and I listened from my office. Ms. Dubois, the American lawyer said, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration, "We need to discuss a resolution to this matter immediately." "I'm listening," Victoria replied smoothly. "Your client's legal team has provided documentation that complicates our case significantly. My clients were not fully aware of certain aspects of their financial history with the deceased." I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. The man sounded like he'd just discovered his clients had been lying to him for months. "By complications, do you mean the $2 million in undisclosed financial assistance your clients received over the past decade?" Victoria asked sweetly. "Among other things, yes. We need to discuss terms for withdrawing our petition." "Terms?" Victoria's voice carried just the right amount of surprise. "Mr. Patterson, your clients have spent months making false accusations against my client, hired investigators to harass Monaco business partners, and attempted to interfere with international business relationships. Why would we negotiate terms for them to stop breaking the law?" The silence on the other end was deafening. "Furthermore," Victoria continued, "Monaco's government has formally noted their attempts to disrupt legitimate business partnerships. Any future legal actions will be viewed as harassment of international business relationships." "What exactly are you asking for?" the lawyer finally said. "Complete withdrawal of all legal actions with prejudice, meaning they cannot be refiled. Public acknowledgement that all inheritance transfers were legal and appropriate, and reimbursement of legal fees incurred defending against frivolous litigation. The legal fees alone are over 100,000 euros, he protested. "Then your clients should have considered that before filing baseless lawsuits," Henri interjected quietly. Another long pause. "I need to discuss this with my clients." "You have 24 hours, Victoria said. "After that, Monaco's government will file formal complaints with international business authorities and will countersue for harassment and defamation." The call ended in silence. Victoria closed her briefcase with satisfaction. "That went better than expected. They'll withdraw everything by tomorrow afternoon." "Is it really over?" "Completely. They have no choice. The documentation of their financial assistance makes their competency claims absurd, and international law protects your business interests absolutely." That evening, I received a call I hadn't expected. "Rose? It's Mom." Her voice sounded different, smaller, defeated. "Hi, Mom. How are you?" "We're dropping the lawsuit," she said without preamble. "The lawyers say we don't have a case." I waited for the real reason she was calling. "Rose, we didn't know about your grandfather helping us over the years. We thought we'd handled our problems ourselves." "Did you?" I asked gently. A long silence. "No, I guess we didn't. Mom, Grandpa loved all of you. That's why he helped when you needed it. But he also understood the difference between helping someone temporarily and enabling them permanently. Is that why he chose you? Because you never needed help? He chose me because I earned it. The same way you could have if you'd been interested in building a relationship with him instead of just receiving benefits from one." "We miss him," she said quietly. "I know. I miss him too. But he's not really gone, Mom. He built something that helps people, creates jobs, contributes to communities. That's the kind of legacy that lasts. Are you happy with your new life? I looked out at the harbor where lights were beginning to twinkle like stars reflected in the water. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Brad wanted me to ask. He's having financial difficulties again. There it was. Even in defeat, even in apology, the real purpose always came down to money. Mom, I'm not Grandpa. I don't rescue family members from consequences of their own choices. But he's family. So am I. And family means supporting each other's growth, not enabling each other's failures. We spoke for a few more minutes before ending the call. I felt a strange sense of peace about the conversation. For the first time in my life, I'd spoken to my mother as an equal, rather than as someone desperately seeking approval. The legal documents withdrawing all claims arrived by express delivery the next morning, signed by all family members and notarized. Victoria reviewed them carefully before declaring the matter officially closed. Congratulations, she said. You're now free to focus entirely on building your business without legal distractions. That afternoon, Albert called to invite me to lunch at the palace. We ate on a terrace overlooking the harbor, discussing everything except the legal battle that had just ended. Rose, he said over coffee, I wanted to ask you something personal. Of course. How do you feel about what you've accomplished here? Not just the business success, but the personal journey. I thought about his question while watching tourists take photos in the gardens below. A year ago, I was an unemployed woman from Chicago who'd never made a decision more important than what to have for lunch. Now I'm making choices that affect hundreds of people's livelihoods and contribute to Monaco's economy. And does that feel overwhelming? It feels right, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I belong. Albert smiled. Your grandfather would be very proud. 6 months later, I was reviewing plans for a second spa facility when Catherine knocked on my office door. Rose, there's someone here to see you, your cousin Brad. I looked up in surprise. Is he with lawyers? No, he's alone, and he looks different. I found Brad in the lobby, wearing a simple business suit instead of the designer clothes he usually favored. He looked tired, older, and genuinely humble for the first time since we were children. Rose, he said, standing awkwardly near the reception desk. Thank you for seeing me. What can I do for you, Brad? I came to apologize. For everything. The lawsuit, the accusations, the way we've treated you your whole life. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. For once, he seemed completely genuine. I appreciate that, I said carefully. I also came to ask, not for money, he added quickly, but for advice. My life is kind of a mess, and I realized that you're the only person in our family who's actually built something meaningful. For the first time since this whole journey began, I felt genuine sympathy for my cousin. What kind of advice are you looking for? How do you do it? How do you make decisions that matter? How do you build something instead of just existing? I thought about his question while looking around the lobby where staff moved with purpose and guests relaxed in luxury that contributed to something larger than itself. Brad, the first step is accepting responsibility for your own choices. Everything else builds from there. We talked for an hour about work, purpose, and the difference between earning something and expecting it. When he left, he seemed genuinely thoughtful rather than just disappointed that I hadn't offered him money. That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the harbor in familiar shades of gold and pink. Tomorrow, I'd attend meetings with potential partners from 3 different countries. Next week, I'd travel to Paris to present Monaco's tourism initiatives to the European Union. My phone buzzed with a message from Emma. Saw the article about the Monaco crown collection in Forbes. My best friend is basically famous now. I smiled, thinking about how far I'd come from the uncertain woman who'd stumbled through her first palace meeting a year ago. Now, I made decisions that influenced international business, managed partnerships with world leaders, and built something meaningful with my own hands. As harbor lights began twinkling like stars reflected in the water, I realized I'd finally found what I'd searched for my entire life, a place where I belonged completely, not because of family connections or inherited expectations, but because I'd proven myself worthy through character and capability. 18 months after my life turned into something from a fairy tale, I was reviewing proposals for a new resort development when Henri arrived with news that made me set down my pen in surprise. Rose, the Principality of Monaco would like to offer you something quite extraordinary. I looked up from the architectural drawings spread across my desk. More extraordinary than inheriting a business empire? Henri smiled and pulled out an ornate folder bearing Monaco's official seal. Full Monaco citizenship, including permanent residency and all associated privileges. The words hit me like a physical impact. Monaco citizenship was notoriously exclusive, limited to a handful of people annually and typically requiring decades of residence. But I've only been here 18 months. You've contributed more to Monaco's economy and international reputation in 18 months than most residents contribute in decades. The Tourism Board, the Gaming Commission, and the Business Development Council have unanimously recommended you for expedited citizenship. Henry opened the folder, revealing official documents with Monaco's governmental seals. Your business improvements have created over 150 new jobs. Your international partnerships have brought new tourism revenue. Your discretion and professionalism have enhanced Monaco's reputation among the global business community. I stared at the citizenship papers, trying to process the magnitude of what he was describing. Henri, I just ran the businesses Grandpa left me. I wasn't trying to transform national economics, which is precisely why your contributions have been so effective. You focused on excellence rather than recognition. He pulled out one final document that made me laugh with genuine surprise. Prince Albert would also like to offer you appointment to Monaco's Economic Development Advisory Board, consulting on international business policies. 18 months ago, I'd been an unemployed woman from Chicago, with $400 and a mysterious plane ticket. Now the Prince of Monaco wanted me to help shape national economic policy. This is insane, I said, echoing my reaction to learning about my inheritance. This is recognition of capability you've demonstrated consistently. That evening, I called Emma to share the extraordinary news. Rose, I can't even process this. You're going to become a citizen of Monaco and advise their government? Apparently, though I still sometimes feel like I'm pretending to be someone more impressive than I actually am. Are you kidding? You've successfully managed a business empire for over a year. You've survived family legal warfare and come out stronger. You've earned respect from international leaders who have no idea about your family background. That's not pretending, that's achieving. Emma was right. The insecure woman who'd left Chicago with a mysterious inheritance no longer existed. In her place was someone who made important decisions confidently, who'd earned her place among Monaco's business elite through merit rather than chance. A month later, I attended my citizenship ceremony in the same palace office where I'd first learned about my inheritance. Albert performed the ceremony personally, an honor typically reserved for heads of state and major cultural figures. Rose Thompson, he said formally, Monaco is proud to welcome you not just as a citizen, but as a valued contributor to our principality's future. After the ceremony, Albert and I walked through the palace gardens where tourists took photos without realizing they were watching Monaco's newest citizen stroll with their prince. Rose, may I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever regret the path that brought you here? The family conflicts, the legal battles, the isolation from people you'd known your entire life? I thought about his question while we walked past centuries-old sculptures and perfectly manicured lawns. Albert, I spent 26 years trying to earn approval from people who never valued me. The past year taught me the difference between being loved and being respected. And which do you prefer? I prefer being respected for who I actually am rather than loved for who I pretended to be. 6 months later, I received an unexpected phone call while reviewing proposals for expanding our conference facilities. Rose, it's Mom. I hadn't spoken to any family member since our brief conversation after the lawsuit ended. Her voice sounded different, smaller, less certain than I remembered. Hi, Mom. How are you? I've been thinking about our conversation, about everything that happened. Rose, I owe you a real apology. The words I'd wanted to hear my entire life, offered now when I no longer desperately needed them. I'm listening. We were wrong. About you, about your grandfather's decision, about how we treated you for so many years. Watching you succeed while we struggled, it made us realize how selfish we'd been. I walked to my office window, looking down at the harbor where my responsibilities and achievements had become as natural as the view itself. Mom, I appreciate you calling. Brad wanted me to ask. He's trying to start over, build something legitimate. He wondered if you might consider him for a position with your company. There it was. Even their most sincere apologies came with requests, but this time felt different. Mom, I'm not Grandpa. I don't rescue family members from consequences of their choices. Silence on the other end of the line. But, I continued, if Brad wants to apply for an entry-level position with the Monaco Crown Collection, I'd be happy to consider him like any other applicant. No special treatment, no guarantees, no safety net. Entry-level. Rose, he's family, which is exactly why he'd started entry-level. I won't enable the same patterns Grandpa spent years trying to break. Because honestly, if being related to me was his main qualification, that wasn't much of a resume. We spoke for a few more minutes before ending the call cordially, but with clear boundaries. I loved my family, but I wouldn't sacrifice my principles to maintain relationships built on financial dependency. That evening, I sat on my terrace, watching the sunset paint Monaco's harbor in familiar shades of gold and pink. Tomorrow, I'd attend my first Economic Development Advisory Board meeting as an official member. Next week, I'd travel to Geneva for negotiations with international tourism organizations. My phone buzzed with a message from Catherine. The conference facility expansion is booked solid for the next 18 months. Congratulations on another success. I smiled, thinking about how far I'd come from the uncertain woman who'd stumbled through her first business meeting 2 years ago. Now I made decisions that influenced Monaco's economy, managed partnerships with world leaders, and built something meaningful that contributed to hundreds of people's livelihoods. As harbor lights began twinkling like stars reflected in the water, I realized I'd finally found something I'd searched for my entire life, a place where I belonged completely, not because of family connections or inherited expectations, but because I'd proven myself worthy through character and capability. The girl who'd been overlooked at every family gathering was gone. In her place was Rose Thompson, Monaco citizen, business leader, and government advisor. Someone who'd discovered that the best inheritance isn't money. It's the opportunity to prove what you're really capable of achieving when people believe in your potential instead of your problems. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories of people who discovered their true worth despite everyone around them saying otherwise. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can inherit is the chance to show the world who you really are when you're finally given the opportunity to shine.